Good morning and welcome to Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee. It's 10 a.m. and we will start the meeting with our apologies. Please, Mandy.
We've received apologies from Councillors Heath, Councillor Perry and Councillor Spencer.
Thank you. Okay, do we have any declarations of interest? No. Moving on to the minutes are held on the 18th of June. Has everybody read the minutes from the 18th of June? Could I have a proposer, please? Thank you, Mike. Seconder? Thank you, Councillor Yates. Thank you. Okay, we move on to item number 4, which I believe that's you, Councillor White.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It's a joint report from myself and the Cabinet Member for Finance and Resources, Councillor Parry, and you may have seen Councillor Parry arrive, effortlessly glide into the room and in a very relaxed fashion sit in his chair. Whilst he catches his breath, I'm just going to do a little bit of padding because actually it's principally the report of the finance portfolio holder. I've got with me Rachel Spain, who's the expert on the subject, so should there be any difficult and challenging questions, I'm sure that either myself or Councillor Parry will refer to Rachel for the detailed answers. The recommendations are set out, and just before bringing Councillor Parry to do the details, just want to draw your attention to the fact that for the financial year that's just passed, we had an overspend of £3.838 million, but that doesn't really give a true sense of the scale of the overspend. It is a small, very small proportion of the council's turnover. But underneath that is a set of results which, as you'll see by portfolio areas, you've got some areas which are making significant savings, and you've got some areas, particularly children's services, where overspends are set out very clearly in the report. We don't hide from that. We are transparent about it, and it's been part of scrutiny through safeguarding and other committees, particularly with children's services, to understand what the cause of that overspend is. And we all know that there's an increased cost in looked after children and indeed home to school transport for SEND children, and that is driving quite a bit of the costs. But they're the headlines. What I'd like to do now, Madam Chairman, with your permission, is just hand over to Councillor Parry to go through some of the details, and with that, I'll hand over.
Thank you, and thank you very much for that lead to infill. Thanks to the traffic this morning. There's not a lot, I think, Chair, that I can really add. I'm not sure if there's a lot of business we can do together this morning in terms of scrutiny, effective scrutiny of this, because it is an historical document in the sense that this is the year end, which ended 31st of March this year. So it's a report to you based on, this is now the final set of accounts, if you like, of the council that we're presenting. There's not a lot different from what we presented at the last meeting of Corporate Select Committee, which was the Q4. There is a slight variation in that because of the final wash-up. As the leader's already said, there are overspends which we were expecting and which almost tracked through the whole of last year, and to an extent the next report will show are also moving through to Q1. And those are around those complex areas of change and transition and pressure in children's services particularly, and a number of children in the care system, and the complexity of that situation whilst we transition that through a number of initiatives that were largely implemented in the second half of last year. So we wait to see the effects of that, and that's something which Cabinet will want to bear down on in terms of seeing change. The rest of the budget, Chair, is quiet in the sense that, as the leader's already said, they're either demonstrating underspends or balanced situations at the end of the year, which I think reflects the strict financial controls that this council has and has had in place for some time, which means that we are financially, therefore, stable, challenged but stable, with adequate to good reserves, with a solid plan ahead, including an investment plan. And only last week we approved an extra £6 million for a highways spend to support our highways improvement plan. And also there'll be other announcements on top of the announcement we've already made to invest in things like our green spaces, etc. So it's a fair and solid position that we're in. We're aware of, you are aware of, the pressures that we're under, the stresses around children's services, SEND is all there. I think possibly the more interesting question is the questions moving forward rather than the questions moving back, Chair. And I don't really want to go into the debate that was had yesterday at a national level, but it does impact on us. And then the question is, so what happens next for local government in terms of the level of support it receives, the fair funding review, whether that will still continue, the cost of care, which is the area that's kind of the dark cloud really over local government, in that we need to know, local government needs to know, and people need to know how we are going to tackle the cost of care in the future. And that's something that's been put back and put off by the past and previous governments, indeed, over many years. So there are big questions ahead of us that we don't know the answer to. The things that we do know, our known knowns, I think we've got good provision for in our current budget and our MTFS. So I think this morning we're presenting an not an unexpected position in our financial outcomes from last year. I think the next item, Chair, will demonstrate that actually some of those pressures continue into Q1 of this year as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor White, did you want to come back on that? No? Do we have any questions? Councillor Francis?
Just a quick one. I mean, we know send transport is a difficult one, Ian, and it drives me mad at school. It really does, to be quite frank. I mean, exponentially, it's gone up a hell of a lot in the last few years. I mean, the amount of children that we have, when we took over this council, was 45 in our school. This September will be 172. And most of those will require transport. So, as far as I can see, Ian, at the minute, it's an insoluble problem. And the children that we're getting are actually, because of time and medical practice, we're getting children with serious issues that are going to require transport, whatever. So it's difficult to square that circle between the amount of children we're getting who are sometimes even worse than we used to have before against our financial budget. I don't know how you're going to do it, Ian.
Chair, just if you would like, in response.
Yes, please do so.
Just, I mean, our hands are tied because of the number of children who are now receiving, care plans, and within that, in terms of finding the provision that meets their care plan, there is some, I think, fairly serious talk about how that can be addressed, and you probably saw the CCN and LGA report last week on SEND, and I'm not quite sure if that's the answer, but there has to be some solution to this because it can't continue. We are currently, we've got a crack team, if you like, on this very subject to try and see if there's a better way of providing the transport. At the end of the day, it's just the amount of demand that's coming through the system. The number of care plans today compared with 5-10 years ago, it's massively increased, we're a bit tight, but that's not to say that we're not trying to do something about the logistics, but I think something needs to be done about the system itself.
Yes.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Ian, and it's a very difficult situation at the minute. As far as the HCPs go, I mean, there's a backlog, and I know we've sent more head sites on to deal with it, and more social workers to help. It's a very difficult situation at the minute. I mean, have we scrutinised the amount of journeys that we do and the cost per journey? Because I read the report some time ago now when Birmingham went bankrupt, basically. One of their taxis was going 4 miles down the road and charging them £7,000 a trip. That's how bad things had gone, and the people were missing it because he wasn't being scrutinised enough. That's number one. Number two is, I know that the head teacher at Marslands has offered to use the transport of our minibus in a cheap way, because the staff are already employed and paid by us, to go and pick some of the children up, if you like. So I need to see if that's being looked at. And the other thing is that with most of the special needs schools now being academies, the control of doing that job is actually gone away from the county, hasn't it? So we're in a really serious catch-22 situation as far as I'm concerned, and I despair sometimes of how things are going and what we can do about it, because money's going to be even tighter in the future. I can see it coming up after yesterday's.
Councillor White, would you like to come in now? Thank you.
Your point about Send Transport's a really important one, and it's an area where the Cabinet and portfolio holder have been looking at the way to reduce the costs of Send Transport. About 6 to 8 months ago, we had a company called Q Routes came to do a presentation, and indeed, once they'd done the presentation, we adopted the algorithms that Q Routes provides. Transport planning is a very complicated subject, and most people who are involved in logistics have a degree in mathematics. It's very complicated. But Q Routes uses artificial intelligence algorithms to see where the send children need to be picked up, and to plan the routes involving the taxi providers and ourselves in the most efficient way, so we can double up taxi lifts to reduce the costs correspondingly. That's the start of it. I think the other thing that we need to tackle is some of the cultural issues around single-use taxis. During the pandemic, some families got used to the idea that the taxi, because of the pandemic, the taxi was exclusively for their child, and now it's one of those things that gets ingrained, and we are working to encourage families to put not just their child but another child, maybe even 3 or 4 children if it's a conventional cab, to get to the school to reduce those costs. So we are tackling it. It is a complicated subject. We are using technology to help us, and I'm quite hopeful that Q Routes, that's the brand name of it, Q Routes can allow us to reduce some of those costs. There are always going to be costs, of course, because it's a function of the number of people with EHCPs going to special schools, and that continues to increase. And I hope that the new government takes a look at EHCPs and funding for education, and I'm sure they will do, so that we've got a better understanding of the nature of education and what we need to provide for kids across the United Kingdom to give them the best chance.
Thank you. Councillor Yates?
Yes, thank you. I mean, in a way, Councillor Perry's quite right in saying that it's, looking back, you know, there's not a great deal to add what the figures are being scrutinising those, but looking at history and near history gives an indication of what's going on into the future, and obviously the same sort of story is carrying on into Q1. There's just a couple of things. The 49 Send High Knees block, the £20 million overspend, which has been discussed many times, and we've seen the charts and things many times. Is that kept off those final figures because it's ring-fenced as separate, so that's not included in the 4.5, so that's sort of eating away and potentially eating away in the background. Yeah, I thought that, to be honest. The other thing is that it's obvious where you can turn the tap off, i.e., you know, you decide not to physically do something with a road or whatever. You are in control. You've certainly got the eye on the ball of what's being spent and when to take action. A few of the overspends are related to staff vacancies, so I presume on the basis those staff vacancies are filled or going to be filled, then those savings won't be there coming back into the next financial year, which would obviously have put pressure on exactly the same position by adding to that £4.5 million deficit. The other thing which I have picked up a couple of times in the report is the suspension of the education banding tool. By implication, that was sort of running away with cost. Could you have a little bit of an explanation on what that education banding tool aimed to do, and basically what was the rationale of suspending it? And if it was selected as a useful tool to actually take us forward, what are the implications of actually suspending a tool which a decision was made was obviously a positive move to improve the situation with that particular provision?
No. The high needs block component, there's a snazzy description for that. It's called a statutory override. From memory, that statutory override ends in April 2026, at which point the portfolio holder for finance and resources then starts to have to account for that 20-odd million pounds. And for many councils whose statutory override is very, very much 10 times higher than ours, that would bankrupt the council. So it's a matter for government to decide how they wish to proceed with those high needs block override costs. You're quite right about the staff vacancies. We will have to keep an eye on that because by definition, if it's felt there's a need for staff to be doing a particular job and there are vacancies, we need to ask ourselves the questions, why are those vacancies not being filled? And indeed, does that mean the quality of the service declines as a consequence of that? That's a very sensitive issue in Staffordshire, of course, because if we remember the mid-staffs saga, that was a financially driven organisation, and the price that was paid was the price of care, the care of the patients. So we are acutely aware of that particular dynamic, Councillor Yates, and you're right to raise it. The education banding tool was costing too much money. We deployed it as a tool to assist, I think, schools, wasn't it? Yeah. Tool to assist schools in assessing the costs of special educational needs. I'm doing this off the top of my head now. The joys of these scrutiny meetings is that the mental agility required, Madam Chairman, to actually turn up at these meetings and recall everything that was discussed is just off the charts. And that's, my recollection was, we intended it to be used in a certain way, and it ended up being used in a way we hadn't anticipated. As a result, costs started to escalate quite quickly, and therefore we withdrew it because, as with all things, not with all things, sometimes you end up with unintended consequences, and with the education banding tool, it was the unintended consequences that were leading to costs. More details than that, I'll have to get the portfolio holder to come back to you, and I will undertake to do that. I've put a box around the education banding tool question that you've raised, and I'll get you a better answer than the one I've just given you, Councillor Yates. But it was costing too much, and that was the reason why it was withdrawn, despite the intention of it. I've given it the old college try, Madam Chairman, but that was a tricky question, and my memory banks are being plundered to try and get to the answer of it.
Did you want to come back?
No, thank you for that. I mean, it obviously is in the report, and it's a highlight. The inference was these costs have run away. The reason, so one of the solutions is to withdraw this particular tool. So it's just squaring the withdrawal of the tool, which was obviously decided to be a good idea to put it in because it must have advantages to put it in. So is there a disadvantage to withdrawing that tool? I accept what you've said. There is always the law of unintended consequences. I keep saying that to people who keep asking for double yellow lines, so I know exactly what it's like. I think possibly, because that's something which has been highlighted put in the report, if not highlighted a couple of times, that's perhaps something we should pick up as part of the MTFS working group to have a look at these things and see where it did go awry, if it was a laudable thing to have in the first place, how can we actually engineer it so the law of unintended consequences is mitigated, so to speak. So, yes, but thank you for that.
Do we have any further questions? No? Can I just ask one, please? It's on page 23, number 106. Is it 106? Yeah, 106. It says that the projects from the school maintenance has slipped from 23-24 and now will be spent in 24-25. Do we know what those projects are, and are they likely to stay in that year, or will they slip again? Is that a concern we need to take on board?
Being told the answer, it's better to cut out the middleman, I find.
So I don't know the details of all the individual projects, but the slippage that occurred in 23-24 has now been caught back up in this first quarter of 24-25.
Thank you. Okay. Welcome to the meeting, Jill.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm
No, you're okay.
all the lights were on red. Colours cross out.
So do we have any further questions? No? Are we quite happy to accept that report? Yes? Okay, thank you. We can now move on to item number 5, please. I think that's over to you, Councillor White, again.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. This is the... now, at the last meeting, I told you that it was the first presentation of the new format of the performance report. I was dead wrong, and Lindsay Bissell, who was seated adjacent to me, jabbed me in the ribs and said, no, it's next time round. And this is the new format of the report. So that's right, isn't it? Yes. Right. So you'll see that, again, even more clearly laid out than our previous versions of the integrated performance report. There are no follow-ups from last time. So often when we have questions that I can't answer there and then, we'll follow it up, and Lindsay Bissell will provide us with some answers. But there was nothing to be followed up last time. Councillor Yates didn't provide any particularly difficult questions that we couldn't answer on the day. There are 18 items in the delivery plan. You can see his brain's now ticking as I'm going to get him. 18 items in the delivery plan and 57 key performance indicators contained throughout. Really, it's on you to pick up on anything in particular. It is a very transparent report, and you'll see that there's a number of red items which might catch your attention, a pleasing number of green items, and there are some highlights that it's set out on page 40 around the number of children in care, drug and alcohol treatment services, employment and skills, what we're doing around the project called We Are Stafford in collaboration with our district and borough partners and the city of Stoke-on-Trent, and highways operational delivery and transformation. And indeed, this report, when it went to Cabinet, sought permission to invest further money, as Councillor Parry had already indicated, into highways. At that point, Madam Chairman, I'll just hand over to Councillor Parry for any details that he might feel he wishes to add, and then hand it back to you.
Thank you. Chair, I think for me the kind of the meat of this is in Appendix 3, which gives a kind of an overview of our position at Q1 and the forecast. And it's pretty much a continuation, and I gave that spoiler alert in item 1, that it would probably carry over into this year. We see again lots of break-evens and underspends, but turning again to children and families, where we see that a continuation of an overspend of 5 million at quarter 1, and in children's services that accounts for 3.5 million of that. Why, you ask yourself, have we got an overspend when we know we've just started the budget? Good question, Ian. The answer, Chair, is that things have changed in a sense, in that the number of children in care has reduced, which is what our objective was. It's come down to 1293, which excludes unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, as it states. And whilst those numbers have reduced, which was, as I said, the objective of some of our transition work, there's a significant overspend of around 3 million due to the unexpectedly high cost of residential provision and unregulated payments. These are placements. These are acute cases, in a sense, of children with particularly extensive needs, and where the market is not necessarily broad. So we are dependent upon specific placements, which become very expensive, and that's why we've got that initial overspend. Question is, what are we doing about it then? And the answer to that is that we are looking at some of our own provision, and you've probably read in the local press that some planning applications are going through right now to acquire additional placements, which will be county placements, and hopefully we'll be able to address some of those cost pressures. And additionally, putting some more resource into what's known as the edge of care stuff, so children that could be vulnerable, that could shift into the care system, and trying to put more kind of upstream support around those families to prevent that from happening. It's not easy, but it's something that needs to be done to mitigate that problem. And overall, you know, as the department is always doing, and that is reviewing and looking at the cost of some of these care placements and the provisions that are being made. So that accounts for most of that overspend then, Chair. We also have the additional, as we've just been talking about, SEND transport. And again, that's growing. Another 1.5 million overspend in Q1, mainly related to EHCP transportation through SEND transport. And as we were saying before, that's something which, in terms of our high needs block, as well as transport, is something which we now have a deficit of 31 million at the end of 23-24, which is charged to our balance sheet, as if you like, the people who are holding it. But this reflects a deficit in the direct schools grant. So in terms of the direct schools grant that funds lots of services, particularly for children with special needs, the amount that's been provided through the direct support grant and the demand for it is outstripping that. So that's why we've got a deficit. It's not a county-council managed deficit, but the balance of that, the deficit of that, sits on our balance sheet and sits under the override, the ministerial override, until, as the leader said, 2026. And then what? I think is up to the government. It's an underfunding issue more than anything. It's not an overspend issue that we've been trying to wrestle with. It's an underfunding issue mainly. Nevertheless, we are, as we've had that discussion before, trying to do something around how that provision is made and how that support is given. But we cannot deny children assessment. We cannot deny children what is due to them in terms of their best start in life. That pretty much covers, again, Sharon, it all covers around the children area, children and families area. Got a small overspend in culture, rural and communities budget. And as it says there, most of that relates to an animal welfare case, 2 animal welfare cases actually, where the County Council, it feels quite Dickensian that we have to do this, but to intervene in issues where animal welfare is not being adequate, and it's our duty as a council to step in. Who knew? And the cost of that in terms of looking after those animals, preparing them, looking after those animals when they've been through that falls on us. So it's, it costs us a small overspend, but it's there. It's £50,000. I think that's all, Chair. I can report on.
Thank you. Councillor Yates?
Yes, thank you very much. The quarter one overspend of £5 million, is that something, a trend which you see continuing? So will that cause a readjustment in the budget as the year goes on, or do you think it's front-end loaded and the issues you've got with the expensive placements are something which can be addressed because it's effectively a short-term thing, like, for want of better terms, putting somebody in a hotel while the home they're moving into is being renovated? I mean, because that's a heck of a lump to carry forward. I mean, it's on target for £20 million in the year, which is obviously troubling, and it also sort of fits in with an issue on page 61, which is the savings tracker. You've got a target of £5.4 million. I presume that's the target for the year and not the quarter. And at the moment, you look like you are around about 8.5% on the way and firmly in the wrong portion of the red. So again, is the savings tracker something which is you feel is achievable? And again, is it one of these things where there's a little bit of investment required to change a working practice? I'm giving him the answers here. Is it something where a bit of investment's required up front to change perhaps a working practice or a technique of doing something, or machinery or whatever, equipment, so that the savings become back-end loaded?
There have been occasions with children's services over the past few years where we have invested further money into children's services, effectively reprofiled the budget for the year. And we've done that, I think, probably 3 or 4 years ago. I think we stuck about £9 million in something like that. And it was 2 tranches, actually, Councillor Francis. And if that is required, then that is what we do. There are some peculiarly expensive placements at the moment within children's services. And by peculiarly expensive, we're talking 7-figure sums for some individuals. And that is putting a great deal of pressure on the service. The counter to that is that the work, the preemptive work with families and the work that the teams are doing within children's services to keep children in mainstream education, keep children with their families, is to an extent starting to bear fruit. And you've seen that in the numbers of children that we have in care. But we are sufficiently flexible in our approach to say, well, you know what, we may well have to reprofile this if things don't get back on track, or indeed stay the same moving forward. I don't think it's as straightforward as saying, well, it's 5 million in quarter one, therefore by quarter four it's 4 times 5. We would anticipate doing something about that some time before we got to that point. Your other question was around savings tracker. Yes, the savings tracker is it's a thing of mystery. Every year for my 15 or so years as a county councillor, the savings tracker has always started at quarter one looking pretty horrendous. And you're thinking to yourself, there is no way we're going to get to hit the targets by the end of the year. And what happens is as the year goes on, the quantity of the savings that are secured increases. Now, it's fair to say, and you'll know this from your time on the MTFS working group, that we have layers of savings in the organisation. So we present a 5-year budget, or Councillor Parry presents a 5-year budget to the council, and contained within that is our ambitions for the year, plus the savings that sit below that. So there's always savings that we're working on throughout the year. And then on top of that, from time to time, the money bags tell us we need to save more money, and we think about other ways of saving money, and we've got to layer those in as well. So the savings become more challenging as the years go by. Demands for our services continue to increase. We see that in particularly EHCP, children's services, and deprivation of liberty safeguards. Take your pick of the things that we see increasing pressures in. But it's reasonable to say that the Finance Department and Councillor Parry's portfolio in particular are punctilious in their pursuit of the savings and making sure that each of the service areas are diligently pursuing down the savings that they've committed to. And that's the reason why we come to these committees and make sure that everything's very, very transparent for you and that you can ask questions around how we're getting on. So, yes, the savings tracker doesn't look good at this stage in the cycle. It improves as the year goes on. That is something that I've noticed over my time as a county councillor, and I hope that that'll be the way it is this year, at which point Councillor Parry comes in and goes, it's going to be tough.
Just sucking my gums for a moment there, Chair. So the savings tracker, we didn't achieve 100% last year. I don't think we've achieved 100% over the last few years. And we shouldn't excuse that because, first of all, we have to set a balanced budget. So that the budget that we've set this year and last year was balanced and not predicated upon in-year savings. But it's good practice to achieve almost business as usual type savings, so efficiencies, improvements, and to set targets for those. So that's what happens here. Those are business as usual savings, improvements, etc. What we don't have is a dedicated cost reduction program at the moment, and we haven't had for a couple of years, or a transformation program. We've got a balanced budget and we've got a balanced MTFS, but that does not mean that continuous improvement in the organisation is essential, and therefore we need to give ourselves some targets and some stretch targets to achieve that, and that's what we have here. Not surprised that in the early stages, before you get into the savings, it takes some time. You've got to put things in place, and therefore you often don't see the fruits of that until Q4 when things start to drop in. But confident that actually the culture of efficiency, improvement, and good budgetary management is well embedded here.
Thank you. Councillor Yates, did you want to ask?
Oh.
Yes, sorry. Just coming back, if you don't mind, just for a second, John, is that okay?
It's all right.
Yeah, just thinking, you're absolutely right. I mean, continuous improvement, technologies change, AI comes in. But by inference, it's almost as if, well, that happens every year and that's the target you set people as individuals. There must be a sort of list and expectation of what those savings are going to be. And that'd be an interesting thing to actually look at and scrutinise, perhaps if not at this committee, the MTFS working group and things, because it may be an idea that councillors actually, with experience elsewhere sometimes could actually contribute to that and do whatever. But I know at work I set budgets and things, whatever. At the same time, it was a challenge to beat them by being more efficient in how you worked and what you did and what equipment you used.
Councillor White.
The MTFS working group in some years previously have gone specifically for the savings and said, ask portfolio holders, how viable are those savings? Your budget is predicated on achieving X, Y, and Z. You've got some hopes, aspirations within your budget. Let's have an honest conversation about whether or not they're actually going to become reality. And I remember as health and care portfolio holder sitting in front of the MTFS working group, having been instructed not to turn up with an officer, so that I was completely exposed to some very, very difficult questioning. Not putting ideas into your head, but you might want to think about that as to whether or not that's a viable option for delivery of those savings.
Thank you. Councillor Francis.
Thanks, Chair. Page 55. Strategic key performance measures. Now, I said this in corporate parenting the other week. particularly the top two, which is safeguarding referrals and people in receipt of services 12 months or over have had a review in the last 12 months. Care Act assessments completed within 28 days. One's in red, the top one's in green. But the trend is downwards for the top one, and the trend is downwards for the second one. But this is 23. So April 24 says, I was looking at 23, April 24 says 73%, where we've gone from 82% on assessments completed, and 84% this year, where it was 91% last year. That's a hell of a drop here, that is. What's going on with these figures? Because if we're going to get things up to date and we've got a strategy to deal with them, it's not working, is it?
So the performance challenges in Care Act assessment completed within 28 days, which is the red one you've referred to, and its performance of 73% in April, below the target. We've undertaken and completed a data cleansing exercise and reviewed the target ahead of the Q2 reporting. A paper is being prepared this month for the Performance Board to recommend a change to the indicator. So whether or not that's the information compared to the same period last year are we comparing apples with oranges? If I can get my phraseology right, we will know that. It's due to report at the end of this month, which is tomorrow. We will know that very shortly after that.
Just as an issue then, have we not been comparing apples and apples, or have we been comparing apples and lemons over the last few years? Because that is so important as far as I'm concerned. The Care Act assessments completed within 28 days. Have we got to put more resources in? Is it lack of resources or what?
I don't know the answer to that right now, but there's, as I say and reiterate, there has been a data cleansing exercise taking place, and we now will be able to say that we're comparing apples with apples. But Mr. Tradewell's indicated. Okay.
Yeah, my understanding is there has been a change in the process for carrying out these Care Act assessments. So that effectively what is now happening is that our performance is being judged on a smaller set of more complicated Care Act assessments, whereas the simple assessments are taken out of that. As a result, that's why our performance on the face of it looks worse, and that's why we need to change the indicator so that we are comparing apples with apples. But yeah, between last year and this year, there has been a change. We need to make sure that we have an arrangement now that we just look at the right indicator, and effectively we're going to have to start looking again in terms of tracking it over time because of that change in what we're assessing.
Thanks, John. Can I come back? Just to
Councillor
do
Francis,
that.
can I just... Councillor White just wants to come back through before you can speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. My sense is we haven't given you a satisfactory answer to that. So what we'll do is, in the same way as we do with other committees, other meetings of this committee, Madam Chairman, I've got the education banding tool from Councillor Yates. The question needs more detail and about the withdrawal of it, and also Care Act assessments and more commentary around the change to the Care Act assessments. So we'll come back to you with that in due course.
Yeah, just as a quick one. Thanks for that, John. So will we have a report in the new format with the apples and apples in Q3 and 4, or will we be waiting till next April?
Councillor Francis, Councillor White said he will come back to us on that question, so I think we need to allow him the time to come back to us with that report.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. What I said was, just to reiterate, the Care Act assessment answer that you've been given is probably not satisfactory. And as you've just indicated with your follow-up question, there's more information that you need to be able to be confident that the data going forward is accurate. So I've asked Rachel to get in touch with Lindsay Bissell so that when she comes back, we will provide you with an answer. As we do when we do encounter questions we can't answer at this committee, we do follow-ups and we'll get that to you as soon as Lindsay's back from holidays.
Thank you. Do we have any further? Councillor Clement.
Thank you, Chair. Just a comment on the highways operational delivery and transformation. A little disappointing that that's still on amber, because I think we can all agree there's been a massive uplift on road repairs and major projects over the last year. I'm hoping that that will go green when we look at the next set of results. Then my question is around the extra care home that's going to be built in Tamworth and one in Lichfield. Where did we get the data from to know that that was needed?
That second question is a very complicated question to answer. There is all sorts of data that goes into it, and it's not one that I can sit here and give any reasonable explanation to you now. My recollection was, is it Meadowrith? Meadowrith is an old-style nursing come care home, and I think the idea was that we'd identified that needed to be replaced, I'm thinking.
Meadowrith and Brackenhall.
Brackenhouse.
Yeah.
Brackenhouse was the other one. So I'm afraid, Councillor Clements, I can't give you a satisfactory answer to that because it's not at my fingertips. Can I undertake in the same way as I have with the other two to come back to you with a more detailed answer?
There'll be a cabinet paper on that in September.
I'm just being told there's a cabinet paper in September on precisely that issue. So it'll be from that point I'll be able to give you more detail. As far as the highways operation and transformation is concerned, at being at amber, yes, you have seen a significant uptick in the amount of repairs going on across the county in highways. There is still some considerable work to do, as you're aware, with structural maintenance being undertaken across the county. So I think, is that a delivery? It's a delivery one. So we've got a lot we want to do, and still a lot we've got to do, and I think that's probably where the amber comes from, but I'll check and get back to you.
Thank you. Do you wish to come back, Councillor? No. Okay, do we have any further questions? No? I think that's it then. Thank you, Councillor White, unless you wish to say anything else.
Madam Chairman, I'd just like to draw your attention to the recommendations. Although it has been through Cabinet, this integrated performance report had within it some recommendations that Cabinet approved, which was not just the information and action that's required, but also an additional 0.8 of a million from contingency budget to highways recovery, which is in Councillor Clements' area of interest with her scrutiny committee, and also bringing forward capital funding of 5.170 into phase 3 of highways investment and the delivery of the highways recovery plan. There is a lot of work that needs to be done in highways, and I would ask both this committee and indeed Councillor Clements' committee that the way we ensure that is delivered in a timely fashion is through good scrutiny and asking difficult questions, as you are inclined to do in this committee, so that we keep on top of it, because the citizens of Staffordshire want to see the roads improved. We are determined to get there, but it's a big job and it requires a lot of money, and Councillor Parry with his team has been able to identify sources of funding to enable that to happen, but we expect that delivery to happen on the ground, and I'm sure that all of us as councillors are in receipt of complaints from local residents where they feel the work isn't being adequately done. And I hope that you continue to feed that back, particularly to the portfolio holder for highways, who will always be interested in examples where not only bad delivery is happening, but also, in some cases, delighted to see where excellent delivery is happening. And I can say that is occurring around the county on a regular basis now, which I'm absolutely delighted. Let's keep fingers crossed that the weather holds and allows us to continue to fill in as many potholes as we possibly can when the summer sun shines. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Okay. Is everybody okay with that and happy? Yes? Thank you. We will now move on to item number 6, the work programme.
Thank you, Chair. The report updates the members on their work programme. Your next meeting is the 10th of September. Since the last meeting, there have been a number of additions to the work programme. So the new apprenticeship strategy, which was raised as an item needing pre-decision scrutiny, has been added to the work programme for 17th of December. There will be a cyber security informal briefing meeting in September. I'll update you on the date of that as soon as it's arranged. The customer services update, since the report was written, it has been agreed that that will come to the committee at your next meeting on the 10th of September. Also, there has been some change to the MTFS working group membership since the last meeting. Councillor Pert has obviously gone to Cabinet now, so Councillor Cox will be representing the Health and Care Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Councillor Burnett will be representing the Safeguarding and Education Scrutiny Committee. Councillor Oates, at the last meeting, the committee asked me to write to Councillor Oates to see if he wanted to stay on the working group. I have emailed him a couple of times, and I think the chairman has called him as well. We haven't heard any response from them. Is it your wish that I take him off the working group? Okay. I think the first meeting is next week of the working group. That's all, thank you.
Thank you, Mandy. My feeling is with Councillor Oates, and we did have this discussion last time, that Councillor Clements says he has a wealth of information and experience. However, he's not bringing it to the group, and we are not seeing him in the group. So my recommendation would be that we would remove Councillor Oates from the MTFS, if that's okay with everybody. Take it that silence is golden and I've got no issues. No?
It doesn't seem as if he's interested in coming, and he's had an opportunity to look at his emails or answer the phone. So I take it that he perhaps doesn't want, and I appreciate I've been late coming today, so I'm sorry about that. So no room to talk, have I? But I think if he's interested, he would come to some of the meetings, wouldn't he?
Yes, I believe so. Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Yates?
Yes, does that mean you're going to look for an alternative member? And I would suggest, if you did, if I can be so bold, as you look at sort of people's experience and look at somebody who's got a good accountancy experience and can drill down on some of the figures. We're very... I don't know what skill set you've got over there.
That experience. What do you mean? No, I agree with you. Yes, thank you. Do you have any suggestions that we can put forward?
Normally, the membership of the working group consists of members of the corporate committee. It has been slightly widened to include representation from the other scrutiny committees. You've still got 7 members, which is quite a good number. So unless there's anybody that springs to mind, 7 members is quite okay.
Are we all happy with that then? Yep. Can I take that as a yes? Okay. Thank you. I believe item 7 we exclude the public, but we have no further agenda points. So that is the end of the meeting. I think that's the fastest meeting we've ever had. Thank you all for coming. It is appreciated.